So today's node is particle motion blur fade, and we have reached here. And if you right click, we have completed all these. We are here on constant, and in the constant we are here on the motion blur fade. So if you take this node is not for to apply motion blur on particle. It is to control or to control already motion blur you have. You can control through this. So it works for the black and white colors as it says here in the documents. So in the document says the motion blur fade expresses the output, a value representing the amount of fade on particle as a result of motion blur. A value of 1 represent no blur, but the black represent complete blur. So black means complete blur, 1 means no blur. So we can control the particle motion blur through the black and white color in your texture. So let's say you have just a particle color and I just connect this here in the emissive. So we will have that flat color, and I'll save this and let's browse this and let's create a Niagara. I'll take the fountain, and in the fountain let's edit it little bit. So I'll just make this GPU, so I'll have lots of particle and local, and let's say you have maybe okay, let's say you have 200 particles and I have a curl noise maybe 500 that is animating, and it is 30. Okay, so I have this particle effect and I will drag into the viewport and I can move here. So I have no motion blur right now. If I play, you can see there's no motion blur. Okay, let's use this material that we just created. So this is opaque material with particle color. So I'll browse this, and in the particle I'll choose that one. So now this is a flat sprites, and I can change the color through from here. So let's say if I make this oranges or reddish, and still if I play, I don't have motion blur. So to turn on the motion blur, you can just type here motion blur, and you have this motion blur amount. Let's say you have one or two. Let's say you have two. And now if I play, I have already motion blur here. So you can see the motion blur here. But you see this flat sprite has the motion blur on the full image on this sprite. So I want to control like the part of this image, like I want half of the sprite should have the motion blur and half not. So there is this node comes. Okay, so let's say you have a radial also, and I'll take a dynamic parameter to control the density. So this is my density, and oops, density. Okay, and I'll just multiply it with the particle. And one more thing, this material was opaque, and if you have the translucent material and you have connected here, and right now I have motion blur here, you can see that. And if I save this material, because it is now translucent, if I save this, now I play here, we don't have any motion blur. So motion blur doesn't work with translucent just like that. So you need to do one thing, that is you need to type here velocity, select this output and turn this on, save this. So now here we have our motion blur. Okay, so in the particle I'll delete that color fading thing, so that's my particle not fading right now, but they have motion blur. Okay, so let's say now in the material you have this radial, and I connect this here. Okay, and I have a density parameter. I'm not using this node anywhere till now. So let's also save this. So now we have the radial thing, but let's increase the size of these. I'll turn off the mass and make the size maybe 50. And let's increase the density here so it will be little sharper. So now you can see we have this particle with motion blur. Okay, so I want on this radial, half radial should have motion blur, half not. So there I will use this thing. So you need to multiply it here. but still it will work on the full image, full radial. I want to mask the half as it says one means no blur, black means full blur. So here I will make this radial half black. So for that you can take any texture, but for me I'll just take the mask and I'll take the green and then I'll take the step and let's make the step 0.5 and then add some value in it and saturate. What it will do, if I show you, I have black and white half half. If I make this add 0, so this add I will use to make this black little gray or maybe full white. So this will be a dynamic parameter. So this is like add, and now we have this thing. So I will multiply this here. So now we can make our radial half black. So if I make this 0, we will have half radial. If I make it 0.2, we will have half black, dark actually. So we can control that. So let's save this. So now in the particles, you can see I have half. So in dynamic parameter, refresh this. I will add 0.2 so you can see at least. And also make this velocity align so these will face that axis. So now here, if I play and I stop, can you see that full opaque red has full lots of motion blur, but that transparent doesn't have much. I'll stop here. So you can see that image, but it doesn't work like it explained here. It says one means no blur, black means full blur, but in my case, one have full blur and black has no blur. So this is working, but not the way it is described. So maybe if I invert this and save this, now if I it's it's turned black, my texture, but it's still here the blur and here not. But it's working. It's working, but it's not working the way it should, but it is working. So let's say if I increase the motion blur even more, amount like 5, and I play, you can see the difference. So it is not the working like it's mentioned, but it is working. So at least you now know the use of that node. Okay, so these some nodes in the material are very new to me also. I'm using these nodes first time, so I have to figure it out first how it works, then I'll show you in action. Although there is expression for each node on the documents, but with this just image some people cannot understand because it takes time to get the workaround of this. So my job is to show you in the action how these nodes works, how these uh, give you output. So that's it for now. I hope you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Keep learning. Bye bye.